Hey guys, I'm Tim Langston with Red Dog Bushcraft, and today we are going to process some rabbits. The method that I'm going to use is more of a survival technique. It's not the technique that we would use if we wanted to save the fur on this animal to go to the tannery, but it is one of the most efficient ways that I know of to skin any fur-bearing animal. It makes no difference if the animal is a mouse or a moose. It can be processed and skinned in this particular method. And that's the reason I show it during survival classes, is because of its versatility. Now there's many ways out there that if you're more comfortable hanging it by the hind legs or hanging it by the neck and caping that animal out that way, there's nothing wrong with that. This is just a method that I like to practice for a survival situation. And it's also a very efficient method to use if that animal is laying on the ground. Maybe you have to have a couple of people when you get ready to skin the animal, but it is very possible to do most all animals laying on the ground with this particular method. So that's the reason that we're doing it this way. Plus it helps keep the hide a whole lot cleaner. Okay, so here's our rabbit, and the process that we're going to use is we've got a trash bag set up here to discard everything that we don't want. We have our tray that is set up, or our cutting board, to put the meat on. And my tools are all set up, and plenty of towels and a bucket of water to wash and clean my hands. Now I'm going to use rubber gloves for this process because it's wintertime and my hands are cracked and I have some open sores on there. Usually I do not wear gloves. I just wash up really well with soap and water. But the method that we're going to use is we're going to remove the feet. There's basically no nutrition in the feet here. It would take you a lot of time to get anything out of these. The calories lost you would never gain back by sitting there and processing this out. It's all bone and tendon, and we're just going to discard the feet. Then we're going to roll the animal on its back, and we're going to pinch some fur up, and we're going to make an incision across ways the back. And then we're going to pull the sweater over the head and pull the pants down over the hind legs, all the way to the bunny tail and the fur that surrounds the anus of the animal. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to remove the feet from the animal and get them out of the way. There's not enough nourishment within these feet. It's all bone and sinew and tough material. You would never get enough nutrients out of these to justify the time that it takes to skin and process them down. So to remove them, we're going to use two different techniques, one with a knife and one with the hatchet. I'm going to manipulate this foot to find the joint, and I really want to cut the cartilage in between the joint and not through the bone. So I place my hatchet directly over top of that joint, and I've got a piece of plywood laid down here so that I protect my table. And then I'm going to take just a hardwood stick and I'm going to baton the axe through. Gives me a lot more control and reduces the chance that I'm going to miss. And when I do that, as you can see, I can go right in where the two joints come together and there's no bone fragments. The last thing we want is a bunch of small bone fragments within our meat when we get ready to consume it later. So the front foot, I do the exact same way. Find the joint, place the hatchet on top, and baton it through. Now I'm going to turn the rabbit over because I always want to work on the side that's laying down. So I'm just going to turn the rabbit over, and now I have the feet that I'm going to be working on my working surface. And I'm going to take my knife and place it, manipulate that joint, find the joint, keep my finger there, place my knife and Don't hit the rabbit now, just hit the knife and baton that foot right off. And that goes right into our trash bag along with any of these little pieces of fur so that we can keep our work area clean. And then lastly, we'll remove the 4th foot. I like using a hatchet because it's a lot heavier duty piece of steel than the thin razor edge of my knife. So I've got a lot less chance of chipping or damaging my blade with something as big as a hatchet. Now in a meat processing facility, they may use something like a meat cleaver, but around camp or in a survival situation, it's much more likely that we would have a good hatchet. Now that the feet are removed, we can take the animal and roll it over on its belly, laying the legs out so that it stays flat. And then we're going to make that incision straight across here and open this fur up. Now remember, your knife does not like to cut fur. It doesn't like hair. Hair will dull a knife extremely fast. So you're going to have to pinch this up, get in there, and do a couple of strokes so that you can open up a hole. Once you have a hole opened up, if you need to further this cut it from the inside out. That way, that hair doesn't dull your knife. Now we're going to take all this little bit of hair here and try to clean this up and get that over here in our trash bag. Just trying to keep our work area clean so we don't get that on our meat. Less hair we get on the work surface or on the meat is the less that we have to clean up later. So now we're just going to pull this apart and we're going to pull the pants off of the hind legs and the sweater over the head. There you can see we've got some discharge of urine. Go ahead and clean that up right away. Get your towel underneath it. That's why we have all these paper towels laying around. Resist the urge to hold on to the animal. Hold on to the fur as you pull the sweater or the pants off. And just pull that right off. All the way down as far as you can go around the hind legs. Now, right here, you may see some material that's holding on. That is twitch muscle, and all we have to do is just barely touch that with a sharp knife, and we can relieve that and make it a lot easier for us to continue that pulling process. Once we get down to the legs, we've got to remove the leg out of the pants. So to do that, you just come to the end where we cut it and push up. And if you see some of that sinew right there that's pulling and resisting, once again, we just touch it with that knife. Notice I'm not cutting into the meat. I'm just cutting that stringy looking material. And our goal is to turn and pop our thumb out underneath it. And then we can place the leg in the web of our hand. See, my thumb is through and it's in the web. And then I can just grab the fur and pull it down off the end where the foot was. Now let's see if we leave a sock. Yes, we did. So right here, because we cut the joint, right here where it holds on to that tendon, we can just cut that tendon and slowly cut around that bone and remove that sock and take that right over to our trash bag. And then we'll repeat that process on the other side with the other hind leg. Removing a little bit of that stringy twitch muscle. Makes it a lot easier. And then when I'm trying to get this opened up, I'm not just pulling on it, I'm rolling my finger like this. So I put my hand right up next to the meat, and then I roll my fingers over to separate the hide from the flesh. And once I get it to where I can get my finger through there, once again, it goes into the web of my hand. That way I'm not squeezing and bruising the meat. And just pull that off. Once again, we left a sock on there, no big deal. We cut that tendon and then just gently. Now remember, a bone will dull your knife extremely fast. Your knife will wear and dull very quickly if you rub it against bone. And notice how close I am to my fingers, but I'm trying to cut away from my fingers, but I'm doing it very controlled and very small cuts. Not getting excited or in a hurry here. All right, so now that we've got that fur all the way down around the bunny tail and the anus, we can work on the front up here and continue our work with removing the sweater. Now, same thing, if there's a little bit of this muscle in here that's holding that fur around the front shoulders and the neck, we can take our knife and just relieve that. Once again, I am not cutting into the meat. I'm just cutting that little bit of tissue that's between the fur and the meat. If you see any fur on your working surface, go ahead and move that away. Holding the rabbit down here at the end, give it one more little pull, and then grab the arm, pushing it back up into the sleeve, and with that same motion of kind of rolling your finger, get that hole where your finger can come through, and you can get the web of your hand in there, and then pull down, and let's see if we leave a glove. Yep, no glove. It's a lot more common to leave a little bit of fur down on the bottom, on the feet, than it is the front paws. All right, this one we'll do a little bit different. We'll push the arm back out of the sleeve by putting our thumb on the end of the leg, and then roll our thumb in that technique to create that hole back into the web of the hand. And now we've got everything up to the neck. So I should be able to hold the end down here. And once again, now that I'm above the shoulders, I can cut just a little bit of this twitch muscle or that sinew that as I pull it, you can see where it's straining. It looks like little strings right there. And I just touch that with a good sharp knife and relieve that. Okay, and we're all the way up onto the back of the head there. Now we're going to do just a little bit under the neck so that we can get up to where the neck was broken during the dispatch. And I can feel that right here. So I'm going to take my paper towel and place underneath the neck, because we're going to have a little blood come out here. And I'm going to go right to where the neck was severed. And since there's no bone, I only have to remove that meat, and the head is now removed from the animal. Okay, so let's reposition here just a little bit, and we'll come back down here to the bottom. Now, we want to cut these sexual organs off from the fur so that we can pull the fur all the way down to the anus and to the little bunny tail. And when we get to that point, we're going to do the same thing with the tail as we did with the feet. we're going to baton that through. So once again, I'll take my board and place that right underneath. And remember, the tail is an extension of the spine. So there's joints in there. So when I get ready to cut the tail off, I want to get the legs out of the way. I want to get my knife as close to the hips as I can. And then I cut down through until I feel resistance and I feel the bone. When I feel the bone, I wiggle my knife back and forth and it'll fall in between those joints. And then I can just press down to go through the cartilage and then cut the bunny tail off. Take all of that and go right into our trash bag. And now we have removed all of the fur from the rabbit. All right, let's reposition our trash bag here and the rabbit, turn it around, because I want to show you a little tip about removing the entrails. Now, right up here at the end of the rib cage is this little white piece of cartilage, the xiphoid. And we're just going to cut that muscle that's on top of that xiphoid so that it can pop out. So that's the rib cage running up this way. And down through the belly of the rabbit, there is a white line. This line right here. But you're just going to draw a line from the tip of that xiphoid all the way down to the crotch in between the legs. And we're going to put our knife in there. And I want to make sure that I don't poke the intestines. So I'm going to lift that up with one hand, keeping my knife tip up. I'm going to run my knife all the way down the belly like a zipper, all the way to the, in between the sexual organs, and then all the way to the vent or the anus. Now at this point, we can see the insides of the animal and you can see the bladder. This is a good time to reach in and grab that bladder and then cut it off so that we retain all of the urine, and that can go directly into our trash receptacle and prevent urine from getting on our meat. So the pelvis of the animal is a round circle like this. And what we need to do is open that up so that we can cut the muscle that's inside that pelvis that keeps the entrails from going out of the animal and keeps anything from going on the inside. Once again, we can do that with a large animal with our hatchet, but with a small animal, we can place our knife between the entrails and the center of the crotch and just press down and baton that through all the way so that now we have opened that up and we can go in there and, like a piece of pipe, we'll take our knife and ream one side and then the other side to that opening so that we relieve that muscle. So I open that pelvis up and I slice down. Now remember, that's bone in there, so you don't want to just seesaw back and forth. You want to kind of scoop and make a draw and not put a lot of pressure on the bone. You just want to put the pressure on that muscle and relieve that muscle all the way around through that pelvis. And if you have to get in there and grab the anus like this to do a relief cut on each side, it's no problem with that, because we want that to come out when we remove the entrails of the animal. So now I'm going to take my hands and come up underneath the liver or underneath the diaphragm and form like a spoon. And with that spoon, I'm going to do a pull and remove all of the entrails out of the animal so that I have got it all out of the pelvis and completely removed. At that time, if there's any of this muscle down here within the pelvis that I left, or any of the entrails that attach to the anus, now I can go back and further trim that and remove the sexual organs. And we can take a look at the organs on the inside, and we'll talk just a minute about what's inside those belly cavity. So I'm going to grab the liver here and remove that. And we're going to take a look at this right quick, because the liver is what we look at to determine the health of our animal. So I'm going to put that on a towel and kind of pat it clean for a minute. And this is a perfect example of a really nice looking liver. The edges are nice and smooth as it goes around. There's no bumps, there's no deformity. When you look at a diseased animal, a lot of times there'll be white specks or yellow specks or something that's shaped like the letter C. And there'll be little dots like little letter C's all over that liver. If you see that, then we do not want to consume any of the internal organs within that animal. Now, a lot of times left on the inside around all of this fat, and this is the best fat and some of the only fat that's on a rabbit, they're very lean animals, is that fat that is around the kidneys. The kidneys may also be consumed, as well as that fat. So we will remove that. Very little knife work. As a matter of fact, you could just reach in and pull them out. Anything else that was within the intestines, I'm not interested in saving. But right here on the liver, if you're going to save that, if you look, there'll be a little spot that looks like a little worm. And that needs to come out. And I think we lost it when we pulled the liver out. And sometimes that happens. All right, so there's our internal organs that we can utilize in the lower part of the rabbit or the entrails. And we want to go ahead and clean that out just a little bit, just to keep our work surface clean. There'll be a little bit of blood in there. We can go ahead and wipe and clean that out. And now we can get into the chest cavity. And just like the belly, there's a white line that runs down through the center at the tip of that xiphoid. And I'm going to take my knife and just do a light stroke to remove that muscle on the front before I come in at the neck and poke in there. And we don't have to be as careful with the chest as we did the belly, because if we hit anything in here, we're not going to get contaminants on our meat. And we can reach in and pull the heart out and cut that off of the arteries and the veins. And that is also something that can be consumed. In a lot of cultures, that's the first part of the animal that is consumed. And we reach on the inside and grab the lungs. Everything out of the belly goes out towards the crotch. Anything in the chest cavity goes out the neck. And we'll remove the lungs. They're inedible. And that leaves the diaphragm. The diaphragm is also pretty much inedible. We can grab that and just pull it, and that acts like a little membrane that cleans out the inside of the rabbit carcass. Once again, we can take our towel and wipe off any blood that is within that. And now this is ready to go on our cutting board and continue our meat processing. Okay, to continue our meat processing at this point, I like to go ahead and remove the belly. so that I can see it a little bit better as far as what I'm doing here. And I just follow along the tips of the rib cage all the way to the inner loins and just cut that off and lay that over there to the side. So that's our rabbit bacon. And here on the front, I put my knife right against the rib cage and slice down, and I remove the front legs from the animal. There's no joint there to worry about. They come right off. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Turn it this way, maybe you can see a little bit better. But I'm just running my knife right along the rib cage. You have to put a little pressure on to pull it apart, and then try not to get into the back, just slicing that front leg off of the main carcass. Now we can come down to the hindquarters or the hams. There's a couple of different ways you can do this, but what I like to do is just come right where the ham meets the body, and I slice in this torpedo-shaped muscle on the inside, which is the tenderloin, and I cut that groove all the way down to that pelvic bone, and then very gently I take my knife tip and let it run around the pelvic bone. Now remember, the pelvic bone is not flat. It was shaped like this. So you're cutting around the bone. If you try to just cut straight down, you're going to be sawing into that bone, and it will cause you great difficulty. So come all the way down to the end of the buttocks. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Just very light pressure, just opening up the meat from the top of the ham down to the back on both sides. So you wind up with a cut like that. Then I turn it over and I find where my cut was here at the back and my cut here, and I connect those two cuts together all the way down to the bone. Same thing on the other side. So here's my cut on the front of the ham, and here's my cut on the back of the ham, and I just connect those two cuts. Now this bloody material that is hanging on, this slime that's hanging onto that ham, you can lay your knife sideways and remove that at this point if you like to. That's some more of that twitch muscle and that sinew that's in there along the bone, that's up around that hip, and some of that inner part of that skin that hangs on to that meat. It doesn't hurt anything, but it does help clean that up, makes it look a lot more appetizing. Okay, once we have the meat cut around the hams, you can hold the pelvis and flex it over, and that joint will come apart. If you don't cut the meat around the joint, you will have great difficulty in removing the ham, because that joint is very strong. That muscle and those sinews and tendons that hold that joint together. But once you've relieved that meat all the way around it, it will usually separate pretty easily if you hold on to the pelvis and push the ham over, extending it in the opposite direction of the way it normally moves. And you can see the ball on the end of the femur. Put your knife in there and notice that I'm just kind of prying that apart. I don't want to run my knife all the way down that pelvis. I just want to cut that connective tissue that's in there. So now we have the main body of the rabbit, and I'm going to come to the smallest rib right here, and I'm going to cut along that rib all the way to the backbone. And then I'm going to repeat the process on the opposite side, coming all the way in. And then very lightly, I cut the inner loin on the inside and the back strap on the back side. And this is a good time, once again, you can remove that membrane that is between the fur and the flesh of the animal at this point if you want to. It is not critical that this be removed for the type of application that we're going to use to cook and prepare this animal, which is I put it in a slow cooker, or in a survival situation, this animal would be boiled in a pot of water. Okay, once the two cuts are connected across the back, once again, we can just twist and sever that and come in there and touch that spinal cord and that muscle and sinew that runs down each side. And now we have the front rib and the back strap on the back. Right here is your best cut of the rabbit. So if this was a steak, this would be your porterhouse, with this being your tenderloin and this being your back strap. Very, very good piece of meat, very tender, very mild, and by far, in my opinion, the best part of the rabbit. All right, just a little bit more cleaning up, and now we're ready to package this up. Let me grab a Ziploc bag and I'll show you the way I package this for the freezer. All right, for packaging for the freezer, I like to use a good quality Ziploc bag and write on the bag what I'm putting in it and the date. And I take the main chest cavity and put that in first. And then I take my hands and I place the ends of the bone inside the chest cavity. A lot of times holes will be created in this bag from the ends of the bones if you're not really careful. So I like to put them inside that cavity, and then I put the back on top of that, and then my belly meat kind of holds it all together. And then taking this and squeezing out as much air as I can, it's ready to be washed, dried, and then placed in the freezer once I get home. All right, so that's the way I process and prepare my rabbits for the freezer. I hope you found value in this. Until next time, I'm Tim Langston with Red Dog Bushcraft, home of global safety and survival. God bless.